Hey everyone, I wanted to take a second and do a video that I've seen other YouTubers do in this music reviewing scene. Most famously, I've seen Anthony Fantano do it, which is a starter pack. Basically a bunch of albums you would recommend for someone to get into a subgenre, maybe a certain sound, and it gives opinions. Now, I want to do it for one of my personal favorite subgenres, which is just grunge music in general. I'm a big 90s fan. Grunge is probably one of my most listened to genre or subgenres in general, so I thought I would talk about that. So I'm just going to talk about a bunch of albums, and to start with, I thought I would obviously start with a Nirvana album, and it's not Nevermind, it's not In Utero, it's their debut album, Bleach. And this isn't to be different, this isn't any of that. I just think that this is a good example of grunge music as a starter, as it's rough, it's in your face, it has banger tracks on it. You get About a Girl on it, which is a very recognizable song already there. So you have a mixture of very heavy songs like Negative Creep. You have songs like School, which are very good. You get these very harsh vocals that you come to know from Kurt Cobain. You get this very early, very, not primitive, but very cutting room floor when it came to where grunge was going to go. And obviously Nirvana was not the first band to do grunge music, and they certainly were not the last, but they really pushed into a different direction. And I think this is a great album to start with. Next up, we have grunge pioneers Mudhoney's album Super Fuzz Big Muff. Now, when I say pioneers of grunge, it really doesn't get further than fucking Mudhoney. Obviously, you could say Green River, you could say Mudhoney, you could say Soundgarden, you could say a lot of these bands. All of them have their own claim to it. All of them pioneered. And I think this album is another just great example of what grunge is, with very fuzzy sounding guitars, very fast drums, very harsh and higher range vocals that were not as pretty as hair metal vocals at the time, as as a counter to this moment. All super kind of stripped back at points, and at certain points a lo-fi, and other points just so grimy and in your face, but it's so fun. And this album is such a great example, with songs like Touch Me I'm Sick, which is such a song. Lyricism is amazing, obviously. Very punky as well. A lot of these early grunge albums were very much heavy on their kind of punk roots, which isn't a bad thing. But as I said in the last album, we would start seeing an evolution, not necessarily away from it, but incorporating more into it. But this album is very much like this garage kind of rock, very punky, very early on of what grunge would be. You also have I think Sweet Young Thing Ain't Sweet No More. I'm pretty sure that's what the song is, which is super foreboding and kind of intimidating, and leaves you very scared for what's going to happen to the person's talking about. Love this album. If you haven't listened to it, give it a listen. Following that, we have Pearl Jam's second studio album, Versus, and I know for some people they might be saying, God, can we not do Pearl Jam? A lot of people are very either indifferent to Eddie Vedder's vocals or just flat out hate him. It's very hard to understand what he's saying at points. And I can agree to that. That I generally don't have a problem with agreeing to a certain extent. I believe the first two albums are their best albums. After that, you have some good songs on there, but then you also have some absolute filler, some crap. It's kind of hard to get that, but their second album, which in my opinion is their best album, especially in a grunge context, Versus, is very stripped back in comparison to their debut album. Has very good songs, is very harsh. His lyrics are more explosive. The instrumentation is a lot more not experimental necessarily, but it gets a bit more alternative. I love the drums throughout the entire album. I think my favorite example is the drumming on WMA, White Man America. Very good song. If you haven't listened to that, his vocals are very harsh, very scary. Lyricism slightly hard to get that. It's very hard to talk about Pearl Jam and use lyricism in the same sentence, but I think in the context of this album it works very well. You also get songs like Daughter, which I think is very good. You have Animal, which is good. You have Blood. You have Go, which is really good. Just in general, Rearview Mirror as well. A lot of good songs that aren't, Alive. Just all these other very popular Pearl Jam songs. These songs are popular when it comes to Pearl Jam fans. Maybe not as mainstream popular as Songs Off 10, but I think it's a very good album and worth a listen if you can get past kind of Eddie Vedder's vocals at certain moments on the album. Next up, shout out to Neil Young and Crazy Horse with Ragged Glory. Now, Neil Young, he's credited a lot of times as being the godfather of grunge, paved a huge way for it, which is very crazy considering how his music generally sounded. But on this album, you have distorted guitars, you have harsher, kind of more strained vocals. The lyricism matches a lot of what grunge would be on songs, especially like Over and Over, which I think is an amazing song from this album. Just a quick shout out for that. I really like this album. I think that this is very good if you're really into that early grunge sound. Next up, we have the debut studio album from Alice in Chains, Facelift. What else can I say about it? An amazing debut album, especially in the grunge music. There's not a lot of voices that are like Lane Staley, rest in peace. Guitar from Jerry Cantrell is amazing. Overall, this entire album is super harsh, super noisy. I love it. Man in the Box, I know it's their most popular song, but it's for good reason. It just makes so much sense. His voice on that is probably his best vocals on any of his songs. One of the best voices in grunge, and then just alternative, like rock, noise rock kind of scene. I also love this album. You also have Bleed the Freak. You have I Know What You Did. You have a bunch of just great songs on here, and I highly recommend this album if you have not listened to it. And finally, we have probably my favorite grunge album, and also just from my favorite band in general, Bad Motorfinger by Soundgarden. Now, I don't necessarily think it's their best album, but I think it's my favorite, especially when it comes to a grunge album. As Super Unknown, I think it clears this album in terms of just musically, sonically, lyrically, experimentally. I think that one is so much better, but this one is so metal. It is so noisy, loud, abrasive. The lyricism gets darker, especially in the second half. You get very poignant like critiques of like celebrities and songs like Jesus Christ Pose. You get songs critiquing music labels like Slaves and Bulldozers. You get amazing popular songs like Outshined, Rusty Cage, which got covered by Johnny fucking Cash. That's crazy to me. The B-side of the album are really good. I think the deep cuts in this album hold their own weight, like Drawing Flies, Somewhere, Holy Water. I think Holy Water is an amazing song that if you're a Soundgarden fan and you haven't heard that song, I feel like you should listen to it. It's just amazing. But yeah, no, that's my albums that I picked. They're not necessarily the best albums, and I could have gone more niche when it came to picks, but I try to do a mix of albums and also some albums that you might be able to recognize, but understand why I think that they're good. You get a little bit of stuff from the early, you get some stuff from the middle, and then you get some of the later stuff. I think it's very good list in general. But let me know what you think. What is, and if you made it to the end, what is your favorite grunge album or favorite grunge band? I'm curious. As I said, mine, Soundgarden, Bad Motorfinger is my favorite grunge album. If I had to pick a second, ooh, that's a hard question. Probably Dirt by Alice in Chains, if I'm being honest, but I do also like Super Fuzz, Big Muff by Mudhoney. And there's other great bands you listen to, like Screaming Trees, Tad, Stone Temple Pilots, all of the Nirvana albums. I know there's 3, but you get the idea. You should listen to all of those if you haven't. I know they're the most popular grunge band, but they're popular for a reason. Alice in Chains, even some of their newer stuff isn't horrible. It's not my favorite, but it's worth a listen if you really want to listen to the rest of the band members. Post Lane Staley, just great in general. There's a lot of great bands you should really listen to from grunge. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and have a good day.